Great. So our next presenter is Kimberley Rothville, and she is a PhD candidate at the University of Auckland in New Zealand and a former teacher here in Japan. So I'd like to turn it over to Kimberley. Good luck.
Okay, cool. So kia ora everyone, coming to you from rainy and cold Auckland today. Thanks for coming to my presentation. I am going to focus on two areas which I feel are really under-examined in the literature. Firstly, how much do Japanese learners need to read in order to see language gains or other improvements, or even how much do they need to read in order for it to count as extensive reading? And secondly, given that extensive reading is supposed to be an autonomous activity for students, do we even know if learners can make appropriate decisions about what they will read in Japanese? So extensive reading in Japanese, whether as a second language or foreign language, is a really new and developing field. And there are very few studies which report with clarity what students read, how much they read, and under what conditions they read. Our first step to defining the amount of reading that would be considered to be extensive reading for Japanese learners is to assess what the goals or outcomes for learners should be. For example, are we talking about specific gains in language acquisition, such as vocabulary, whether in terms of depth of knowledge or greater numbers of words? Are we looking at the acquisition of grammatical items or the ability to use them productively? Is it improved kanji knowledge or something else? What we know at the very least is that about 10,000 lexemes equates to about 95% coverage of running words in Japanese. But we don't know how much learners need to read to have a chance of learning those lexemes through extensive reading, such as when Nation 2014 calculated an approximate target for reading for learning the top 10,000 words for English. Similarly, we don't have research that clearly specifies how much students should read or how often in order to achieve specific improvements in comfort level or anxiety when reading. One small area where there is some specific data is in regards to improvements in learner reading speed as a result of extensive reading from a newly published study this year. Some of the research published does give some details of how much students read. For example, Banno and Kuroe reported that there was a maximum target of 60 books for a semester for their students, which means around 4 books per week. Hitosugi and Day reported the amount of books each student read, and also the grading rubric for assigning book levels, but there wasn't much detail about the book lengths. And Hirabe in 2011 was able to include a small amount, the amount of time each participant spent reading, as well as the number of books. But like in Hitosugi and Day's study, the number of books each student read varied widely. There are 3 studies that I could find where participant reading amount was reported in characters, which is a more precise amount compared to the number of books, or even how many pages there are in each book. The first one reported their participant read an average of 2,313 characters in about 15 to 20 minutes of reading on the days in which she did read, which meant she averaged about 8,326 characters per week. Although they characterized their learner as an advanced learner, I would question that, since the learner needed to read text that had pronunciation guides on the Chinese ideographs. And I would say that we really should be reserving the term advanced for learners who have very strong Japanese skills and for whom the writing system itself is not a major hurdle. Tabata Sandham in 2017 reported that her participants read about 10,000 characters each week, but it wasn't clear how long it took learners to read that amount. In the most recent study, Peters in 2022, was much clearer than the previous ones in terms of reporting the amount read and the time spent reading. And in this study, participants averaged more than 10,000 characters per week, while reading for a bit over an average of 10 minutes per day. So, current research doesn't clearly answer the question of what amount of reading is extensive when it comes to Japanese, but it does clarify some minimum targets that students can meet. Based on the latter 3 studies, we can say that intermediate level students can read at least about 10,000 characters per week in a bit over 10 minutes per day. And it seems like for beginner learners, 1 or 2 graded readers a week is feasible. But we still need research that clarifies the relationship between reading amount and specific language or attitude gains in order to quantify what amount of reading is effective for learners. And although there's a lot left to do in this field, the current research should give teachers and researchers confidence to be ambitious in the reading goals that they set for learners in Japanese. So, to the second part of this presentation, do learners actually know what level of reading or what level they should be reading at? And that's a really important question because the activity and process of extensive reading really requires us to be very hands-on. Learners need to choose for themselves what they're going to read. If we are essentially leaving learners to select their own books to read, can we be sure they are reading at a suitable level that is at or slightly below their comprehension level when they start reading, a level that is not going to lead to them developing foreign language reading anxiety, which is a noted problem for Japanese learners. As yet, there doesn't appear to be any research that addresses this critical question. To begin to answer this question, I present some data collected from a small research project from participant reading logs and emails that help to understand whether learners do develop an awareness of what is easy for them. That is, what level materials are at or below their comprehension level and what is too far out of reach for them at the time they attempt it. These 9 learners were in their second year of university level Japanese study, which I would say equates to upper beginners. They had a mix of L1s with Chinese speakers denoted by the kanji symbol. Of course, because they chose to sign up for a research project, they are likely to have been more motivated to read than students who didn't. Because this project was carried out before the pandemic, they are likely to have more well-ingrained study habits than current students. And as you can see, they had quite a range of reading levels. But on average, they read for 10 minutes per day, 7 days a week, and they read an average of 4 books or web articles per week. In Gareth's case, he started at level 3, and I checked with him that he was pronouncing kanji in Japanese, not Chinese. And then he moved up to level 4 for a bit, because as he told me via email, level 3 wasn't teaching him anything new. If you remember my presentation from last year, Gareth was one of the cases that I presented as evidence of learners engaging with text in non-language study related ways. But even though he did care about improving his Japanese ability, it's not the case that he didn't engage with the text in authentic ways when doing extensive reading. Now, Gareth was quite interesting because you see the spike in his data. And that's around the time that the movie and novelization of Your Name, Kimi no Na wa, came out. And he really enjoyed the movie, so he brought the novel version of Your Name to read. He gave it a go for a couple of sessions, but then abandoned it because it was too far above his level. He jumped back down to level 5 books where he was mainly reading from the Read in 10 Minutes series. Even when I asked him towards the end of the next year when he was required to do extensive reading as part of his 3rd year Japanese course, he remarked that level 5 was still the right level for him. So you can see that he understood what the right reading level for him really was, and he did stick to it. Francesca started out reading her own comic book version of Doraemon, which she estimated to be around level 4. When she started reading from the graded readers in the library, though, she started reading from level 3, and as you can see, there is a bit of an adjustment phase. Francesca often read from the Sendai International School's graded reader series, so sometimes it seemed like her choices when reading below her level might have been for personal interest, as with the first level 2 book, which was about Sendai's Tanabata Matsuri. When I saw in her log she jumped up to level 5 and 6 books, I asked her about it, and she said that she'd been having trouble finding books at her right level. So I offered to help her look for some, but she managed to find some on her own. And as you can see, she dropped back to level 3 and 4, which she described as her proper level. But by the start of her second semester in the project, she felt ready to try level 5 books, and so she read at level 4 and 5 for the rest of the project. Harriet was an L1 Chinese speaker, and her reading logs also clearly show that teachers and researchers can't just assume that L1 Chinese learners of Japanese can read Japanese easily. Having said that, though, she often read children's stories, which are grammatically more difficult than the graded readers of the same level, as they often make use of non-standard word forms. At several points in her reading log, she makes clear clear statements about her judgment of the appropriateness of the level she's reading at. For example, she said, "I got used to the difficulty of level 2 books, and so I read quickly." But then 3 weeks later, she said, "I feel like it's the hardest in the series, as I didn't understand well the first time." And she continued reading at level 2 for 2 more weeks before trying level 3, where she said, "I can easily understand level 3, so I start from now on." She wanted to try and level up to level 4. And she said that she found that level 4 wasn't hard for her. But for some reason that she didn't state, she moved back down to level 3 again for the next book. The last time that she tried a level 4 graded reader again, she said, "It's time consuming to read level 4 since I'm not familiar with some grammars in it." And she dropped back down to level 3. As you can see here, Claire had a bit of a phase in the beginning of switching back and forth between level 2 and level 3 books. She commented in her reading logs, "Still well within my level. Level 2 and 3 are both fine. It's really just dependent on what vocabulary happens to be in there," which shows that for her, both levels felt the same in terms of comprehension. Claire was mostly motivated to read the newspaper articles in NHK Easy, so once she found those, she hardly chose anything else. She was able to read them very quickly and usually read 4 in each 10-minute block. When it comes to the spikes that you see to level 4, she read the same level 4 book both times, so it seems that it wasn't that comfortable for her the first time, even though she had an interest in reading it. Emily initially started at level 2, and she wrote in her log that comprehension was good and quite easy, might move up to level 3. Although she tried to move up the levels as quickly as possible, she did understand that she was reading above her level, saying, "Tried level 5, it was pretty difficult, so I might switch between level 4 and 5 for a bit." So she clearly understood what was above her level, but she didn't yet have a good grasp of the extensive reading process or the value of only advancing according to your comprehension ability. However, after I explained to her that level 5 would probably be difficult even for third-year students, and that the extensive reading guidelines advise only moving up according to readers' ease of comprehension, she was much more relaxed, and you can see there are several periods where she tries a level above, but then drops back down when it's still not right for her. David mainly chose to read level 1 and level 0 graded readers. When he did choose a level 3 book, it was because he was going on holiday for a week, and he would rather be responsible for only 1 book than 6 or 7. The book he chose was a picture book version of Spirited Away, and he noted that he thought being familiar with the story would help him understand it. However, he found that in reality, it was harder than he thought it would be, stating, "I need to use a dictionary quite often, but the book interests me, so I like reading it. It's still hard to read though. I don't think I can understand it fully without a dictionary." And as you can see, he jumped straight back down to level 0 once he had finished it, showing that he knew that it had been above his level and that it was better for him to read at level 0 and 1 as he had been doing. But by the end of the semester, he felt ready to move to level 2. Anne was the most regular reader in the project and wrote extremely detailed reading logs, about 70 A4 pages in total. Although her reading chart looks random, as if she doesn't know what she's doing, her logs reveal that although she felt that levels 1 and 2 were her level in the first semester, she did sometimes pick up books that were out of her normal reading range if she thought they looked understandable. For example, the first time she read a level 3 book, she wrote that she had picked up a level 3 book to read today, as when I flipped through it, it looked manageable, so I decided to try it out. I enjoyed reading it as I understood what was happening. Anne read a lot of the children's books available, but their levels are not clearly shown on the books due to the university's library policy. So she needed to exercise her own judgment about the suitability of each book she picked up that piqued her interest. And this is mainly what is shown on the reading log graph. But sometimes she would deliberately choose a level 0 book for the purpose of learning vocabulary from it. Over the course of her participation in the project, her reading level did tend to increase. And near the end of the project, she commented on a level 4 graded reader that she was reading, saying, "As for the level, I am perfectly happy reading at this level as of now." There we are. But although the majority of participants did appear to exercise reasonable judgment about the right level of books to read, a couple did not. Ben started out with books at level 2, but found the repetitive vocabulary and grammar structures in fiction-graded readers annoyed him. He then found a non-fiction graded reader and said, reading a non-fiction book this week was a pleasure. I did offer to help him find more that were at his level, but instead he picked up a level 6 graded reader for Japanese children by himself. I would have thought this would be well above his level, but he didn't report having trouble with the book, despite the vocabulary level being expected to be above his Japanese level. He reported that the grammar points covered in his textbook in class appeared in the book, and that his fluency in reading Cantonese helped him to perceive the general meaning of the sentences. And so for the rest of the project, he read level 6 native speaker graded readers. Although he possibly did understand the main points of the text in the books he read, he was probably reading at too high of a level, even with his extensive Hanzi knowledge to help him out. Gareth and Harriet had a similar language background, both being fluent in reading Mandarin, but found that levels 4 and 5 and levels 2 and 3 respectively most comfortable. Imogen, like Francesca, started out reading her own books, which I judged to be around level 2 or 3 of the reading level scheme. Imogen was a student that was struggling with her Japanese course, and her own books were at a level that was too high for her. I did offer several times to show her the book from the university library, with especially the level 0 and 1 graded readers, but it wasn't until about week 6 of the project that she did actually go to the library to get them out. When she finally did, she did seem to realize that the level 0 books were more appropriate for her, saying, the graded readers are so much better than the books I've been reading. They're totally helping me more than my own books. The grammar is easier to read too, and there is minimal vocabulary that I don't know. So I still think it's good that I'm reading level 0. Overall, the learners here did appear to know what the right reading level for them was, and they mostly stuck to it, moving up or down the book levels as they felt necessary. Sometimes there weren't enough books in the library, or sometimes they had high interest in a book and wanted to try it, and this was reflected in the data collected from the reading notes and emails. But there were a couple of learners who found it difficult to make choices about the reading materials, or who had competing interests that meant that they did not necessarily read within their comprehension level. I think, though, that in general, this demonstrates that teachers and researchers should be able to trust learners to make the right call on the books that they read. So to come back to the original questions, how much do learners need to read, and do they know the right reading level? Well, in terms of need to read, we still can't answer that, but the literature published so far does demonstrate some minimum reading amounts that are very achievable for Japanese learners. For beginners, at least a graded reader per week, or even up to 4 books per week in total. For upper beginner learners, a book a day is a good starting amount, as the lower level graded readers each take less than 10 minutes to read. Multiple NHK News Easy articles can be read in 10 minutes. If the teacher wants to set a page count goal and the library includes children's books, the goal should be set at more than 2,000 pages per semester. In terms of reading time, 10 to 20 minutes per day is very, very doable for students. For intermediate learners, the minimum target has better data behind it, with 3 studies pointing to a goal of 10,000 characters per week, which can be accomplished when reading for just 15 minutes per day. Because learners engaging in extensive reading are expected to read autonomously with relatively free choice over the materials they choose to read, understanding whether they really know what their right reading level is of critical importance to teachers, readers, and learners themselves. And the data from this project suggests that learners, by and large, are capable of understanding their appropriate reading level and sticking to it, only moving up when ready, which is an important finding for this field. However, some learners do need more support and guidance from teachers and researchers to ensure they read at an appropriate level. Thank you.